What's up, guys? So as I mentioned briefly in the middle of the 50-minute long video we did yesterday on the massive spring quarterly update patch, Revenant did, as soon as the patch dropped, start another AMA on Reddit in which many different devs all showed up and answered a ton of questions. You would have thought that this kind of cool community interacting with the entire company AMA style thing was only something special that they did specifically with Colin's departure. Well, here we have everyone doing it again. It's really cool to see that so many faces went out there, and there was once again a lot of opportunity for people to get many answers about current development for the game. This one was not as explosively eye-opening with crazy amounts of new facts as the Colin one was, but there were a few cool nuggets. I did tell you guys that I'd give you all the skinny, so here's what you missed if like me, you basically just went in-game and played a lot of the patch instead of hanging around talking to the devs. Essentially what I've done here is I just spent the past hour or so going through the thousands of posts sorted by newest, and every single time I saw a dev response, I'd read it, and if it was actually worthwhile, something interesting, I've jotted down some notes here on exactly what's going on. So maybe a few things will slip through the cracks, but generally speaking, it should be okay. Now, before I get into that as well, a couple of things from me about the patch that never made it into the 50 minutes, that either because I just missed it or because it's only taken a little while for people to realize. A couple of things that are going on. Number one, Squad UI, unfortunately, now no longer shows people's health going up and down. Usually when people talk about this, they're saying, oh, this sucks if you're a healer, if you're a druid, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. I actually think this sucks for everyone in general, whether you're in a raid squad, whether you're in a world versus world squad, whether you're out in the open world doing some kind of a meta event. No matter what role you're playing, it's important to know if your group is on the cusp of death. It's going to affect how conservatively you tackle the situation. So I think this is a big thing, and I'm not entirely sure whether it's intentional or not, but I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably just some kind of a minor bug. Also, very cool, I don't play any classes really, either the ranger or the thief, too much that would use the new short bow, Chukun Champawat. I think that's how we'd say it. But the cool thing about this collection is I have had countless messages from people since the patch came out talking about how awesome this legendary collection is. I think I'm going to go for it because not only does this reward you with a legendary at the end, but supposedly it really does feel like a very cool adventure traditional quest that the devs have put in the game. And not only do you get a legendary, but there's some new unique items. There's like a mini that you end up getting, and there's some kind of exclusive back piece item that gives you like this cub that will travel around the world with you that doesn't actually interfere with your actual back piece or glider, so you can kind of have both equipped at once, like a new cosmetic equip. It's kind of interesting. You guys might see me talking about that a little bit more in the future. Another thing that I totally never mentioned is, number one, the guild portal will take you to the raid lobbies, so they've even thought about that. You can meet up with everyone in your guild hall now, take the portal to the aerodrome, and then go off to wherever you want to raid from there. I kind of like that. I don't think that's a huge game changer on its own, but it at least shows that the devs are still thinking about the portal. I still stand by the fact that that portal would be so much more useful if it gave us some more valuable destinations, and I still really like the idea of being able to run guild-based activities, as in the portal will let all you and your friends zone into places like Keg Brawl and you know, South Sun Sprint, so you can race against your friends and stuff, but maybe that's a little bit off topic. And then finally, another huge thing I never talked about was Stronghold. Stronghold did also get a lot of changes. It wasn't just the 2 Conquest maps that had some changes. Stronghold was a big part of Heart of Thorns, and it is a shame that it isn't a bigger part after Heart of Thorns has come out. I don't like the idea that ArenaNet may have added an even better game type, but Conquest gets all the love and attention and adoration from the community and nobody looks back at it. Well, there were some changes there, and I feel pretty bad that I missed that. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Let's get into the stuff from the dev AMA. This is absolutely in no particular order topic-wise. It's literally the first posts that I found ordered through to some of the last that were of interest. So if you check it out on screen, I'm not going to quote the devs directly every time, but there will at least be the actual post coming up like most situations. So number one, a lot of people with the SAB patch last time enjoyed the metal remixes that went in the game. I talked about those. I really enjoy them as well. I didn't enjoy the way they automatically played with the Tribulation Cloud sections. I think that was a little bit of a miss. But what a lot of people wanted was a boombox, an SAB boombox that would allow them to listen to this music even when SAB wasn't in the game, similar to how we have the other SAB boom boxes. Funnily enough, a dev did respond to this and said that actually this was something they were considering. But it's kind of a weird thing, right? Like, you've got Terry, you have a very specific type of music, and you've got SAV, and you've got a very specific type of music, and to add a boombox that plays metal, that people can then, even when the Super Adventure Box festival isn't running, take out into places like Queensdale, is kind of hilarious. I mean, if that did exist, I think one of the funniest things to do would be just to play that boombox and stand right where people pop out into the world in level 1 and completely destroy everyone's sense of what this fantasy game actually is. Maybe that's me being a little bit of a troll, though. But we'll see. They do say that it was considered because of stuff like that. They thought maybe not, but it was received so well when the festival returns. Who knows what they'll add? They have been very consistent in saying, hey, look, yeah, when the festival comes back, we can add a lot more in the way of rewards. Usually that's been with regard to Guildhall decorations, so I can totally see why the boombox could come back, in a metal form next year. We'll have to see. Next, I want to talk about inflation. Now, it's quite good that we're talking about this quite early because this was, as far as I could see from the thread, the number one concern most people had for the devs, and that the devs time and time again were answering people on. And, they were not skirting around it. They were tackling it straight on, and this is inflation. Obviously, there is now a lot more ways to get cash in Heart of Thorns. It's a lot easier to get Ascended Gear through your dailies in Fractals now, and the devs do confirm this through the new way that the dailies are set up. Fractal dailies as well, by the way, are not Swamp of the Mists anymore, which is fantastic. But also, everyone's daily is giving them 2 gold. And that's not a small amount of cash, so people are obviously wondering, hey, is this not just going to inflate the hell out of everything? And the general response from the devs is this, that no, actually, they have a bit of headroom in the economy. I don't know how this works. I'm not going to pretend to understand how this works. But they do anticipate that there's enough headroom that they can give people 2 gold every day for doing their dailies, and it won't impact things too much. Generally speaking, the dev quotes are suggesting that it's the people who play all the time and accrue ridiculous amounts of money that are responsible for most of the inflation. And your casual average guy who comes in and just does his daily each day, getting an extra 2 gold, shouldn't make that big of a difference. The idea that there's a bit of headroom for a 2 gold reward on every daily is kind of consistent with what we had a while ago as well, where it seemed that we were in a period of deflation since Heart of Thorns came out. But again, I'm not too knowledgeable on all of this stuff. Here's one dev post about it verbatim. He says, of course, we're also adding gold back to the dungeons today with the new repeatable achievement, but I'll directly tackle the question. Most wealth in the game is generated by people who are very proficient at generating wealth. They can bid a lot for what they want because they have a lot of gold, and that process drives inflation. Meanwhile, the broader player base is just getting by. So we keep a close eye on how much gold can be generated from extreme farming, but at the same time try to provide a decent income to normal players. And that is absolutely what this patch was all about, right? Like the normal people who don't get to sit around playing Guild Wars 2 all day, every day, and can conform to the strict timers of all the meta events. It's for those normal guys, and I've got to say, I really, really like this daily change and this 2 gold flat. I can imagine your average person now having a lot more fun in Guild Wars 2 because they're pushed to do the dailies more, and the dailies are so much more varied and fun. Plus, they drive you to areas of high population, might I add. The way that they've implemented, for example, the daily jumping puzzle, the daily mini dungeon right now, or the daily dungeon path, the way these are implemented is it's so easy to find other people who are also game for doing it. You go to that daily jumping puzzle and there's a huge amount of people around there porting, or the same for the mini dungeons, or there's a load of people on LFG for the actual dungeon path, sorry. It's a great system. I'm very happy about the 2 gold. I understand people's fear, but hopefully the devs are right here that it won't actually impact too many things. Next little thing, very funny, small thing that we're not going to talk about for very long, the inventory size bug. This has been, I guess since the launch of Guild Wars 2, an issue. You guys might not know about this, but if you open your inventory, you scale the inventory to a specific size so that, it's got 5 columns across and then, a bunch of rows down. And you close your inventory. When you reopen it again, there's a chance you'll get hit by a bug where that size you specified you want your inventory to be gets reset and it comes up at a different size. And then you close and open it, it comes up a different size and a different size. And you can't maintain that perfect inventory style that you want. And it really is only a problem with the inventory. A lot of the other panels in Guild Wars 2 that you can open or close don't allow you to specify their size. But over the years, the players have consistently told the devs, hey, this is a problem. This is a problem. Can you solve this problem? Can you solve this problem? And occasionally it's actually slipped in the patch notes where they've said, yeah, this should be fixed now, guys. And it's never been fixed. Ever. It appeared in the patch notes for this big patch again. And I read it yesterday. And instead of saying it in the video, I thought I will hold back and wait and see, because I'm gonna look like an idiot if I talk about this and they still haven't fixed it like all the previous times. And guess what came up in the AMA? Yeah, it's still not fixed. And basically the developer just says, look, this is a really elusive, difficult bug. Well, every time that's appeared in the patch notes, it does seem that they fixed another fringe case scenario where it was happening, but it's really hard to nail down. And some people will still be getting hit with it. So that was pretty funny to see. Next, I want to talk about the shared inventory slot. There were a lot of posts about this because people are happy to get a shared inventory slot, but people aren't happy that this is permanently filled with a level 80 boost until they use it. There are some people out there who have got, 9 character slots on their account, and all of them are already filled with one character of every profession in the game at level 80. It's like, oh, you've just given me a level 80 boost. I don't want to use it because I have nowhere really worthwhile to use it, but at the same time, I want the slot, so why can't you just let me move it out of the slot? The devs went into a lot of detail about this, and I do agree with what they're saying. One of the things was, just practically speaking, a lot of people trying that level 80 boost out. They try it on a character, and then they delete the character, and they try on another character, and they delete the character and try it again. And if you didn't have it in that fixed slot, it was really likely that people would accidentally just delete the level 80 boost itself. So they've moved it there, and they've made it so it's always going to be there. But also, they didn't like the idea of this being this really cool reward that everyone just ends up dumping in the bank and never actually using. And I understand that. I am definitely the kind of player that Revenant give cool things to a lot of the times, but I'm just like, oh, I'll save that for later. I might want that for later. I might want it for later. And I kind of appreciate that they just sort of forced me to pop it. And I ended up just using it on my first ever character on my account for what it's worth, my Mesmer. They didn't get any levels, but I got a celebratory die pack out of it anyway. So there were a few posts about that. A bit of explanation from the devs on exactly the way they'd implemented that. And for what it's worth, there are no plans for them to sell that separately on the gem store. I think that was a reasonable thing to think they might have wanted to do, but it's not on their radar. Moving on. Talking about the new DPS testing area and all the cool functionality that is associated with it. Of course, a feature like this, it's just like the decoration features, it's a rabbit hole, and the second you get in there, you see all the cool things it can do, and then you wish that it could do more and more and more and more and more. And so somebody asked, hey, what's happening here? It does sound like it might get updated. This, to me, knowing ArenaNet, having seen the way that Guild Wars 2 has been developed, it kind of feels like the DPS testing area is the kind of update that they'd bundle in and then sort of forget about and never really update again. But here we do have developers saying that there are potential updates, that they have ideas for a lot of things that could go into potential updates for it. For example, right now, the DPS testing lab is primarily focused on the offensive capabilities that players have. It's for testing your damage against golems. It's not very good for testing how well, say, you can heal. It's not very good at testing when a lot of damage is incoming, how comfortably you can keep everybody up, and it's not very good for testing scenarios where you have a lot of pressure coming in at you, but you also want to damage at the same time. So that's like one big area that it's quite deficient in. And so they say at least that they've got a lot of ideas of where it could be improved, and we might see that. But I think ArenaNet are being very, and rightfully so, being very careful about making any promises. I would not take this as a promise that it's getting updated, but it's nice to see that they're still considering that. Next, one of my favorite responses, really, of the entire thing, it comes from Mike Z, and he's talking about the timing of the story at the end of the game, specifically with regard to Dragon's Stand and Hearts and Minds. So Hearts and Minds being the last mission of Heart of Thorns. And so basically, he was like, somebody asked a million questions, and he just picked this one out. And he's talking about, when does this happen in the story? So he says, the only one of these questions I can attempt to address is the timing of the Dragon's Stand and Hearts and Minds. He says this, he says, both the encounter in the open world and the battle inside the dream are supposed to be taking place at roughly the same time. I added allied NPCs near the entrance to the mouth of Morgemoth in one of the first patches after the launch that talk about how the main battle there is a distraction so that a smaller force can slip in and try and kill the beast from the inside. It's generally believed that just killing the mouth of Morgemoth won't be enough as it keeps growing new mouths to replace the lost one. So I found this really interesting because we all know that this area of the story has been an absolute big mess. And so Mike's understanding of the way it all works seems to be contrary to what the in-game world actually tells us. See, funnily enough, Lorantha of the Wild, after you've completed the Heart of Thorns story, explicitly tells us that the mouth of Mordramoth is still active after the death of Mordramoth in the tower. And what Mike's saying seems to be a little bit contrary to that. What I'm saying there is, I'm not trying to call him out and say, oh, you don't understand your own story. What I'm saying to that is, maybe we should marginalize and not look so closely at that little bit of Lorantha dialogue that's in the game, and listen to what one of the devs themselves is saying, that yes, the idea genuinely is that as you are inside fighting Mordramoth himself in the dream, that is when the Dragonstand stuff is going on. Now, he says roughly the same time, so there's obviously that window of wiggle room there. Maybe the whole topic is something that doesn't really matter and we shouldn't fixate on too much, but I would like a clear story, you know, feeling like I've got a clear story after I come out of a campaign, right? Anyway, moving on, because that wasn't really so much about the patch anyway. Someone straight up asked why Agony Resist exists. And I don't really care much for the question. I think it's quite obvious as to why Agony Resist exists, but I think the dev explained it quite well. Obviously, Agony Resist is this mechanic, this gear-based mechanic you build into your gear as you climb through fractals. I think it has a lot of worth. This is what the devs have to say. They say, Cameron, ArenaNet Cameron says, Ben, Sean, and myself just had a discussion about this. I think the best way we can describe Agony Resist is that it acts as a personal progression system for players as they journey through the fractal scales. By requiring a certain amount of AR, players have a tangible, quantifiable goal that they can work towards when looking to ascend to higher scales. We don't have any plans to remove it, but we do want to streamline the acquisition of Ascended and infusions to make gearing up more straightforward and palatable. And that last line is very important because it is a pretty huge mess. Like, you've got your ring, and then you can infuse your ring, and then you can attune your ring, but you can't attune your accessories, and then there are the consumables to factor in, and then there's kind of the progression through the mastery system is also another thing you're building as you're climbing your way through the fractal. So it's a bit of a mess, but the core idea, I agree with, just as Cameron explains here. I think it does feel quite fun, and it's definitely something for those traditional MMO players who like the feeling of building more stuff into their gear to have a mechanic like this in place. One of the main things I'm excited about, as someone who's a veteran player of the game and hasn't done much Fractals, one of the things I'm most excited about is taking my main into Fractals and actually upgrading that gear a little bit. It's superficial and it's a bit silly, but I like that idea of getting more powerful rings and, you know, finally being able to attune these rings and continue progressing up the rungs there. So I do think it has some value. And I like that the devs talked about it because it was a topical thing to mention now that Fractals are so much more lucrative after this patch as well. A great question was about the Revenant weapon skins. Now, guys, remember last year in February, I actually got to play some of these early press builds of Heart of Thorns. There is footage that I've put out there before of me playing a Revenant with these flashy, cool weapons, the Revenant weapons, like a specific Revenant-based skin for each of the Revenant weapons that you could have. So you had like a Revenant hammer and sword and so on. Except that when Heart of Thorns came out, these things we'd seen early on in the press days, there was no way to acquire them. They hadn't done anything with them. And it seems that whoever had made those skins had forgotten that they'd made those skins or didn't realize that they'd ended up in the game or what, but they were lost in transit somewhere. People have known that they've been missing for a while. The devs actually piped up and said, hey, yeah, we don't know where they went. And Mike Z actually said, look, I'm on the case. We are going to get those in the game. So hopefully the mystery of where these weapons went will be resolved, because they were a cool skin set. And I wonder how they're going to implement them in the end, because I presume that was the biggest issue. It's like, well, where do you put these things in? How exactly does it fit in? Are they going to do their own collection? We shall have to see. Pretty important little post. Maybe we don't want to read too far into it, but about the way the devs want to reward us. I'm just going to straight up read the question and the answer here so that there is no wood and potatoes interpretation muddying the waters here. Check it out. Danidata says, with Fractals getting some love recently, do you guys ever plan on making the tonic easier to obtain? I recently saw a guild get it, and while I'm really happy for them, I can't help but feel slightly jealous because I want to turn into a kitty golem at all times too. And so the response comes from ArenaNet Ben, who says, we are looking into moving further away from pure RNG as a reward system. And it's possible that the tonics could play a part in that. All right, so don't poo yourselves with happiness here. Obviously, I think that A lot of people dream of an MMO where there is no RNG associated with any rewards whatsoever, and everybody just looks at RNG as this cheap tactic devs employ to artificially increase playtime and introduce grind. I think there are very real reasons for RNG to exist in games, and I think RNG can be, if implemented correctly, quite fun in games too. So don't jump with both hands at this too closely. Pay attention to the fact he says we're looking into moving away, and he's just saying pure RNG. So like this tonic here is absolutely pure RNG. What would be non-pure RNG then, you wonder? What would that be, Wooden Potatoes? Well, maybe this is systems like we have with the magnetite shards in raids, where there's a lot of RNG associated, but if you get very unlucky, you have a currency that allows you to straight up buy your item in the end. Anyway, I think that the Fractal tonic is a great candidate for something like that, and that kind of idea is what ArenaNet are probably going to try to take forward with a lot more of the game in the future, and that is something that I think is the best of both worlds, and I would love to see more of in the future. Next little quote, very small clarification here about mega servers. Remember before the patch came out, they'd said, hey, there are going to be some mega server changes. I'd speculated this might have some benefit to the way guild halls are structured. Well, this is the first we've heard of it from quite a while. Somebody asked, hey, is the mega server work still going on? And John Smith said that they're still working on them. There's nothing else, but this does have value to me because it means that it hasn't just fallen off the table and been completely not considered anymore. Or, you know, some big roadblock came up and we're just not going to hear about it. Apparently, mega server changes are still on their way. And so last of all, kind of a juicy thing to end on as well. Don't forget that this patch was largely about Fractals. There are a lot of changes to Fractals, and somebody was asking a little bit more about this. ArenaNet Ben comes back, and I think there's some really cool information in here. Talking about Fractals, first of all, are there going to be even more intentions to update more Fractal instabilities? And absolutely yes, there are going to be even more updates to the instabilities. And hopefully, this is Wooden Potatoes adding on to the end here. Hopefully, this might mean complete revamps to them as well. They were asked, are Fractal leaderboards still going on? And there is absolutely no plans for anything to do with Fractal leaderboards anymore. The whole idea has just become a bit of a legendary joke within the community now. So I'm happy to hear ArenaNet have just laid it to the side. Nothing going on with leaderboards. Fractals were not born for leaderboards. Any ideas that once upon a time floated around with leaderboards or how they may have worked, I think that chapter of Fractal development is over now. And so, also, we do know that a new Fractal is coming, and supposedly progress on this is great, and it is currently on track at least to be released this year. I'm not sure how I take that comment. Man, I know I'm just a selfish, greedy little nerd that wants as much content as possible, but I don't want to think we're only going to get one new Fractal all year. This was a great patch, don't get me wrong, and it brought a lot of quality of life and may have pushed the expansion to the place that it really needed to be, but it's still not a content patch, right? So I'm still desperate for content, and then you hear a small quote like this, it's like, yay, content, but also one Fractal? I mean, this isn't them saying there's only going to be one Fractal. It just means that the next new Fractal is on track for this year. I don't know. It would have been nice to hear it's on track for this summer and then the next one after. I don't know. Maybe this is just greed from me. And maybe I'll calm down when Living World comes out again. And then finally, we of course saw with this patch that they are doing overhauls to Fractals 2. The first was Cliffside. Cliffside has got some really big improvements and changes this patch. And so the question is, hey, how's that going with other Fractals? And Ben says, I don't want to spoil any surprises, but we are confident that you will love the other changes. So he won't give us any candidates or exactly what's changing. But that's pretty exciting too, and maybe that kind of counts as a minor substitute for the lack of totally new Fractals for a while. But there you go, guys! I will leave off on a final dev comment. I love these moments where I feel stupid and I suddenly realize that I'm talking about things way over my head, and any translations in the comments would be lovely. The Fund James says, do you guys have a CI team, and are unit tests part of your definition of done? And his response is, we do have dedicated engineers working on build/CI. We also have some developer regression suites. Most of the traditional CI concepts are not DoD for our development teams due to workflow or legacy reasons. This makes a lot of sense. So Lund James says, thanks for the response. I can imagine the challenges that'd be for rigorous CI. Integration testing must be nightmarish too. And another response comes in saying, there were several talks about CI/CD pipelines from mobile PC studios at GDC 2016, and Riot gave an excellent talk about their Docker Kubernetes-esque pipeline for League. It is happening, just very slowly. And that's a great post. That was definitely the most important one for me, and I took the most information out of it, of the entire thing. that's basically what you missed. Just a quick little roundup for you all here on what the developers were saying just as the patch went out. I'm going to head back in game, do a dungeon run. That could well have been the footage you're seeing in the background. I will see you tomorrow. I still have my eye on scribing particularly, but especially after some of these things I've heard about that, the new shortbow collection, I may have my eye on that too. So we shall see. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think. Did I miss any big dev posts? Be sure to drop them in the comments so everyone else can check out where that Wooden Potatoes is messed up. But until then, have a great evening, everyone, and I will see you next time. All right, so look at the footage right now, guys. Look at it. Look at how well this is. Oh, bravo, ArenaNet. Look at how well you've done that. So now, when you're buying stuff from vendors, you can just click a little arrow up or down, and as you click it, you can choose how many you're going to buy in that one click, and it will dynamically update the actual price of that item when you're buying in that large quantity right there, and then you can accidentally buy a bunch of bags like I did.